With every new generation comes new Pokemon that quickly become fan favorites. Oftentimes, it's starters, box art legendaries, or just Pokemon that take center stage in the anime. But almost always, in every generation, there is one new Pokemon that surpasses all others and earns the status of icon. And so today, I'm going to be selecting the single most iconic Pokemon from every region. Let's get right into it, starting with the first region of Pokemon, Kanto. And taking the crown for the most iconic Pokemon from the Kanto region is, of course, Pikachu. Seeing how Pikachu is the mascot of the entire Pokemon franchise, hopefully this selection doesn't come as that much of a surprise to you. Let's begin here by discussing Pikachu's role in the anime. And believe me when I tell you, I cannot overstate its importance. It's quite literally one of the main characters chosen by Ash Ketchum many years ago. It's the perfect selection to be the main Pokemon of the anime, as Pikachu's design and color scheme could appeal to both boys and girls alike. Since the first Pokemon episode, Ash's Pikachu appeared in a grand total of 1,232 episodes and over 25 different movies. And even after Ash did retire, Pikachu was still a main character of the new Pokemon Horizons anime as Freed's Captain Pikachu. And of course, that Pikachu has quickly become a fan favorite. Meanwhile, in the games, Pikachu has been accessible in every game since its introduction back in Gen 1. And while it's certainly not all that powerful in battle, it has still gotten loads of buffs and enhancements over the generations, such as the Light Ball, a G-Max form, and even 2 signature Z moves. And also, there is certainly no other Pokemon that has received as many different forms and costumes than Pikachu. However, Pikachu's biggest role in the entire Pokemon franchise might just be in the real world. I mean, Pikachu is everywhere. Many of the Pokemon Company's logos are just Pikachu. Pikachu has also been afloat in just about every single Macy's Day Parade event since the early 2000s. I mean, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that Pikachu's impact on our culture is one of the largest we have ever seen. And as far as fictional characters, Pikachu is on the level of the likes of Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny. Oh, and finally, I'm sorry to say this to any Goku fans, but Pikachu is certainly the most iconic anime character ever. Without Pikachu, Pokemon just wouldn't be the worldwide phenomenon that it is today. Now, some honorable mentions to the Kanto region go to Bulbasaur, as it was the first Pokemon in the Dex, Charizard, as it's a fan favorite and probably the second most iconic Mon ever, and finally Mewtwo. It is the most well-known legendary, who is also the star of the iconic first movie. The most iconic from Johto was a bit tougher to pick, however I ultimately decided on Lugia. To many longtime fans, Lugia is their favorite legendary. It's honestly one of the few Pokemon in the entire series who is almost unanimously loved. Lugia is able to perfectly blend a simplistic design while still capturing that majestic yet epic scale we hope to see from legendary Pokemon. Now, Lugia burst onto the scene in 1999 with the release of Pokemon the Movie 2000. The movie actually premiered before the Gold and Silver games were released, so to see this new legendary Pokemon, you really had to go out and see the movie for yourself. And to this very day, many fans claim that Lugia's film is superior to the first Pokemon movie. And a quick fun fact about Lugia is that it was created entirely new for the second movie by the Pokemon anime head writer Takeshi Shudo. His main goal for the creation of Lugia was to have it be the ultimate Pokemon. Lugia has also gained a ton of popularity thanks to its role in the games. These games are both jam-packed with awesome content, and to this very day, they are some of the most beloved in the whole series. However, my favorite game that has Lugia on the cover is Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, a game that may or may not take place in the mainline game timeline. However, it is still absolutely epic, especially because in that game, Lugia dons a new and exclusive shadow form. But beyond just being on the cover of various different games, Lugia has always been a very impressive Pokemon in battle since its inception. It has always been one of the most prominent walls in all of competitive battling, and that's thanks in large part to its multi-scale ability. But of course, being a legendary, it also has some amazing stats. Some other Johto Mons I considered for this region's most iconic are Umbreon, as it is a very well-loved evolution and arguably the face of the dark typing, and then also Ho-Oh. This was for a lot of the same reasons as Lugia, however, I just believe Lugia has a lot more fans. For the Hoenn region, we have another box art legendary here with Rayquaza. Now there might be a little bit of personal bias here, as Rayquaza is my favorite legendary, and Pokemon Emerald is my all-time favorite game. But I'll try to keep this entry for Ray as objective as possible, and I think we should begin with Rayquaza's prowess in battle. Since its Gen 3 introduction, Rayquaza has always been a god tier Pokemon in every aspect. When using it in game, it's basically a free win button in almost every scenario. And in competitive, Ray has lived in the Uber tier for its entire life. But in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Rayquaza got even better. Beyond just a fun post-game with the Delta episode, Rayquaza received a major power boost. And that, of course, was thanks to its new Mega Evolution. The only Mega Evolution, in fact, that did not require a Mega Stone to activate. Just its new and OP move, Dragon Ascent. So that means you could also equip an item to Mega Ray, like Choice Band or Leftovers, to make it even better. Mega Rayquaza was so strong that it actually got banned from the Uber tier. So that means Smogon created a new tier strictly because of Mega Ray. And I know I really haven't dived too deep into the lore of any of these mons, but I certainly think Rayquaza's story is as cool as it gets. I mean, it is basically a certified beef squasher when it comes to settling down Kyogre and Groudon. But Rayquaza isn't afraid to scrap a little itself. As we see in the 7th movie, it has a major rivalry with Deoxys. Rayquaza has also received some awesome and epic moments in the anime, such as the 7th movie, the Mega Evolution specials, and now we even have a shiny Rayquaza taking center stage in the Horizons anime. Finally, Rayquaza was the first ever legendary to truly be the king of the box art legendary trios. And I'd also argue that we have never seen a legendary as epic as Rayquaza ever since Gen 3. The other Hoenn Pokemon I considered for this spot are Mudkip, because of the memes, and Gardevoir, because the internet is a crazy place. The selection for the Sinnoh region was an easy one, and that's because it's Lucario. Lucario burst onto the scene with its own movie, Lucario and the Mystery of Mew. It was actually a quite good movie, and the perfect way to help advertise the new 4th generation. And thanks to the movie, it should come as no surprise that many thought Lucario itself was a legendary Pokemon. And then once the Gen 4 games got released, we finally got the opportunity to use Lucario for ourselves. And boy was it awesome. Its stats are incredibly well balanced, and it can be used either as a physical or special attacker. Now, Lucario has always been amazing in battle, however, its peak was certainly during the 6th generation when it got access to a new Mega Evolution. With its newly equipped Mega form, Lucario was actually able to solo the entire Kalos games. Then when we look into Lucario's roles in the anime, it's basically always been in the spotlight. It was hinted to us way back in the Advanced series that Ash Ketchum himself had incredible aura powers that directly linked him to Lucario. And while Ash didn't actually use Lucario in the Diamond and Pearl series, it was all well worth it to see him finally use one in Pokemon Journeys. This Lucario quickly became a fan favorite and the regional ace of this series for Ash. And ultimately, it became Ash's one and only Mega. And now, looking back, Lucario is honestly one of Ash's greatest Pokemon ever and is probably on his ultimate team. However, Lucario's greatest feat of all is that he's been in not one, not two, but 3 different Super Smash Bros. Games. From Super Smash Bros. Brawl all the way up to Ultimate, Lucario hasn't missed a game. I mean, Super Smash Bros. Is basically the Avengers of the video game world, so we can pretty much say that Lucario has reached icon status not just in Pokemon, but in gaming history as a whole. It's because of all of this that it should come as no surprise that Lucario earned 2nd place in the 2020 Pokemon of the Year contest voted on by fans. The other Pokemon from Sinnoh I considered here are Infernape, as it's a powerful starter who also had an awesome story in the anime, Giratina, since it's the devil, and finally Arceus, since it's basically the creator of the Pokemon universe. The Unova region introduced the most Pokemon into a single generation ever. However, the most iconic from the 5th generation is Zoroark. So the selection here for Unova was actually pretty tough, but I ultimately decided on Zoroark because it's basically just Lucario Light. You see, Zoroark was another Pokemon revealed prior to the introduction of its native generation with the release of the Zoroark Masters of Illusions film. The film painted Zoroark as quite the epic and impressive mon, as it was able to keep up with the likes of the legendary beasts. We also, of course, got to see Zoroark's special illusion ability, which is still unique to it and Zoroa all these years later. And of course, the ability itself is still very cool. When using Zoroark, it can oftentimes give you a major leg up in battle, especially when you're battling a psychic type. And while we're discussing Zoroark's role in the games, back in Generation 5, Zoroark was incredibly sought after and easily one of the rarest mons in every Gen 5 game. However, there is no denying that the execution of Zoroark's marketing just fell flat when compared to the likes of Lucario. And while I'm not too sure as to why this is, it could be a multitude of things, such as its lackluster design or even its underwhelming movie that really didn't help elevate it to the same level of popularity as Lucario. The other Pokemon that I was considering for the Unova region were Victini, as it's the 000 Pokemon with a very fun victory gimmick, and Kyurem, because it's the third legendary from Unova and the original fusion Pokemon. As we jump to 3D now with the Kalos region, this was another easy pick, as I of course had to go with Greninja. Greninja. Where do I even start? I guess perhaps let's begin with the games. So when the Kalos starters were first revealed, it became pretty evident that originally, Froakie was the least liked of them all. But then, when we finally got shown what they would ultimately evolve into, everyone was like, okay, yeah, I gotta take the Ninja Frog because Greninja is sick. In the XY games, Greninja was most certainly the most dominant starter for a common playthrough. And then in competitive battling, it was the most overpowered and versatile mon in the whole game, thanks to its new rare ability, Protein. Greninja was so special, in fact, that the game director of Super Smash Bros., Masahiro Sakurai, decided to add Greninja into Smash 4 before the X and Y games were even released. But boy, was it almost like destiny. And don't forget, as I stated earlier, being a main character in the Super Smash Bros. Games is one of the highest honors a video character can have. But the thing that catapulted Greninja into its iconic status was, of course, its role in the anime. Ash Ketchum's Greninja is undoubtedly one of his top 3 Pokemon he has ever had. From its story, to its lore, to its one-of-a-kind exclusive and awesome form, it was really just an amazing mon that did so much for the entire Pokemon brand. Greninja in the XY anime just felt a bit more mature than anything we had ever seen from Pokemon before. And the storytelling around the Ash-Greninja form was actually very well written and even kind of mature. We did get access to this powerful Ash-Greninja form in the games, but it wasn't until the following generation. And the form itself was incredibly overpowered and basically a free Mega Evolution. And finally, to cement Greninja's place as the most iconic Kalos Pokemon, that 2020 Pokemon of the Year contest saw Greninja take home the first prize award with over 120,000 votes. Some other good options for most iconic in the Kalos region include Sylveon, because it's a very popular evolution and the face of the fairy type, and Aegislash, who was a meta-defining Pokemon for the competitive scene back in Gen 6. Now, in the tropical region of Alola, I knew I would have to go again with a starter here, and so I ultimately decided to choose Incineroar. It was a super close race between Incineroar and Rowlet, but I ultimately decided to go with Incineroar for a couple of reasons. First, there is no denying Incineroar's impressive battling prowess. I mean, of course in the Sun and Moon games, it's great, and it's definitely the best starter to use in the Ultra Sun and Moon games, but Incineroar is at its best when it comes to competitive battling. In the VGC format, Incineroar has quickly become one of the most dominant and most prominent mons in battling, with access to Intimidate, Fake Out, Parting Shot, and being immune to Prankster really make the Wrestling Kitty one of a kind and the crux of many teams. And then when it comes to the anime, Incineroar has gotten a lot of attention during the Sun and Moon series. First, Professor Kukui, aka the Masked Royal's ace Pokemon, was of course Incineroar, who originally was the strongest normal mon in the entire region. But then of course we also had Ash's Incineroar, who, in all honesty, might have just had the saddest backstory of any Pokemon ever. And what's awesome about Ash's Incineroar is that it was able to defeat Kukui's while he was still just a Torracat. I only really wish we got to see a bit more of it as a fully evolved Incineroar. But one of the biggest things Incineroar has going for it is Smash Bros. By now, you should know how prestigious it is to be a playable character in Smash Bros. And it was pretty surprising to see Incineroar as the most recent Pokemon to join the roster, but it actually ended up being a great pick. When I do play Smash Ultimate, I really do enjoy using Incineroar, and this is because thanks to its unique revenge mechanic, you're never really out of a fight. Now some other Alolan mons I consider for this spot are Rowlet, because it's so cute and so fancy, Mimikyu, as it's got a great little gimmick and it is a widely adored Pokemon, and finally Lycanroc, as it's the iconic Ash Ketchum Pokemon that won him his first league. Now the Galar region was tough to decide on, as no Galar mons really stick out. And let's face it, the Sword and Shield games were honestly pretty hated. But I finally decided on Toxtricity as the most iconic mon from Galar. I don't, however, have a ton of great reasonings as to why, but I guess I should mostly discuss its importance in the games. Toxtricity is a very solid mon in both terms of competitive and in a normal playthrough, especially now in Gen 9 with access to Terra Normal Boom Burst. I think where Toxtricity really thrives though is in its design. Or should I say design, seeing how it has a ton of great forms. The low-key form is definitely solid, but I definitely prefer the amp form. The rich contrast of yellow and purple colors are really appealing, and it helps Toxtricity stick out among a somewhat lackluster looking Galar Pokedex. I also have to mention Toxtricity's amazing Gigantamax form. Seeing it gain that fully electric guitar is an awesome touch, and seeing him swinging around in battle makes it even cooler. Now how about a little fun fact about Toxtricity? Did you know it was actually the first Galarian Pokemon ever revealed to us? Yup. Back in the Game Freak offices in the Ultra games, you could actually see a poster there with Gigantamax Toxtricity on it. I only really wish we got to see a bit more of Toxtricity in the Pokemon Journeys anime. Now, obviously Ash wouldn't have used it, as he doesn't use other electric types, but I really think Toxtricity would have been a great Pokemon for Go to catch and keep around on his team, especially if it was the amped form. As for some of the other Pokemon I considered from Galar, we have Snom, thanks to the memes, Zacian, as it is an amazing box art legendary who is incredibly OP in battle, and finally Dragapult, as it is a very well-liked pseudo that sees a ton of usage in battle. And finally, now we have Generation 9's Paldea region, and the most iconic Pokemon from Paldea is Tinkaton. Now Tinkaton is one objectively cool Pokemon. I don't know if there's ever been a Pokemon that has become extremely popular thanks in large part to its Pokedex entry, but with Tinkaton, we can confidently say that it did. I'm really hoping that we get to see Tinkaton gain a prominent role in the Pokemon Horizons anime. And finally, let's wrap up Tinkaton's entry by talking about Tinkaton's role in the games. Now, Tinkaton is a great addition to legitimately any team, as it boasts easily the best typing in all of Pokemon. The Fairy and Steel combo is incredible, as it's either immune or resists over half of all typings. And even its signature move, Gigaton Hammer, is so awesome in fact, that you simply cannot use it twice in a row. Overall, the selection here for Gen 9 was tough, as, well, the generation is not even finished. We are still actively in Gen 9, with an anime series that is just starting to find its footing. Some other Paldean Pokemon I was considering here include Fuecoco, because it's adorable and a well-beloved starter similar to Rowlet. Clodsire, because it's funny looking and actually very good in battle. And finally Terapagos, as it's become the face of the terastallizing gimmick and it's got a major role in the new anime. Well guys, that's who I believe is the most iconic Pokemon from every region. But who knows, maybe I was wrong. So let me know what you would change about this video in the comments section below. Also, real quick, I need you to drop a big like on this video if you stayed to the very end. Thanks guys, love you all.